The following presentation was recorded at the Redman Solutions User Forum held in Adelaide on the 31st of October 2017. The presenter is Chad King, Manager Transformation at City of Playford.
So, in terms of the example I'm going to run through today, and I guess our lessons learned, this is probably the higher end of how you go about digital transformation in a DA environment. We haven't gone down the path of just buying Trapeze or just buying Bluebeam or just buying technology and thinking that's going to solve all of our problems. But our journey's been around proper end-to-end transformation and really understanding customers. We've got some staff here and some former colleagues to call out the bullshit if there isn't, so feel free to do that. So, what was the problem we were facing? Well, like many other DA departments, especially in SA, we've got 68 councils who do largely the same thing. We had a paper-dependent process. 2,000 DAs a year, every one of those comes in, goes through an admin team, they work out which colour folder it is, work out which documentation is there, what's missing, sort of through that process. Things got lost. Files would go missing. They'd either be on my desk or on Jordan's desk or in the recycling bin for some reason. Downstairs, we don't know where they went. And because of that, we had unhappy staff because they weren't sure what they were accountable for, what the scale of their, remit was. We had unhappy customers because things were getting lost, there were slow processes. And when you get unhappy customers, that leads to unhappy councillors. A mess. And a lot of this came down to unclear process, unclear system, unclear accountabilities. So we went through and said, well, this is the problem we want to solve, how are we going to tackle it? Let's start by looking at the data. Let's start to unpick this thing and understand what are the patterns and trends. And so when you think about all the different categories that are under the Act, there's a mess in terms of how we process one application on a Monday, what that staff member would view it as, what they'd make a call on, what the application looked like on a Tuesday. You have significant variation. So what we see there over time is a reduction in the amount of time it takes to approve a DA, which is fantastic. There are incremental wins. But the gap between your orange line and your blue line is the random delays that just happen because of that process. So your blue is the legitimate wait time because you're waiting on a customer to give you something, something's missing. The orange is all the other waste that happens in a paper environment. So understanding that we had a problem, we had a bit of an understanding of what the data looked like, we had to understand, well, how are we going to tackle this? Because as Matt touched on, buying the technology is not the solution. We couldn't go out and just say, yep, we're going to buy this magical bit of software and plug it in, and it's suddenly going to make all of our bad processes good. Wasn't going to work. And we've seen that with other, any other sort of processing environment or any other DA environment where you go and buy tech and try and install it. Doing that in isolation just doesn't work. You get some quick wins for a while and then it drops off. People might not understand what the tech's for. And so we took a holistic approach, wanted to understand end-to-end, how do we improve this whole process, and wanted to get out there and engage our customers. So we followed a human-centered design approach, which is a fancy methodology for just saying, go and talk to your customers and understand what exactly do they want. And there's a whole bunch of reading you can follow up on that if you're really interested. But it was critical to our approach. We also realised that whilst we had a huge amount of talent in the room and we had an amazing staff, because we weren't clear on who could make what decisions, everyone was doing it differently. And so depending on who processed an application, you'd get a different outcome. And that can sound frustrating, but that can also put you at risk. If I make a call on an application one way and you make it a different way, that's the sort of thing that can land you in court. So realising that getting system and process right, getting consistency, getting accountabilities right was critical. What I've thrown up there is a bit of an example of how you go out and engage and what that ideation process looks like, or coming up with something, testing it with your people, with your customers, and learning from it. For us, going out and talking to the customers was absolutely gobsmacking. So first of all, we went out and spoke to some of our high volume customers, looked at the list of volume over the past 3 years, picked out the top 10, made some time, and went and spoke to them. And they were surprised that we were there. They were confused. Why the council people here talking to us about process? This is their thing. And I've thrown up some quotes around what we learned from it. The key thing was consistency. So particularly within the SA market and within Playford. Playford's a major growth area, 700 houses a year, 9k of road. The biggest piece of work is volume house building. And so if you think about that as a supply chain, everything else in that process is consistent except that approval. And we've done work as a state on getting the certification quicker and more consistent, but that planning process could vary between 1 week or 6 months, depending on the complexity. So the customers were saying, fix this. We'd love it to be 2 days every time, but it's okay if it's slower but consistent. So that was really useful insight for us. We also learnt that a lot of these, I guess, applications we're handling start their life digitally. So gone are the days where, and you still get a bit of this, but an architect starts off with bed sheets and a grand vision. Most of these things are born in AutoCAD, and they go back and forth between the designer or the architect and the engineer, and they iterate themselves. So they'll flip the files back and forth, and that's starting to become what we're seeing in BIM models. But the only reason it becomes paper is because it has to go through some sort of approval, whether that's a certifier or whether that is a council. So for us, going out and talking to the customers gave us a huge amount of insight into where we needed to influence that supply chain of documents to work out how do we maximise value here. So jumping to what did the change look like? I'm skating over a lot of detail, and we've got a report and we're happy to share that and I guess share some of the case studies and some of the trauma and the pain which the team felt. But we got to a point and we sustained a lot of these numbers where almost all of our approvals went out electronically. So it comes in, it either comes in electronically or it gets scanned, and then it lives the rest of its life as a digital file, lives in perpetuity on the council website. Huge reduction in cycle time for applications. So end to end, not from when it gets stamped in someone's office, but from the moment it hits the post box to coming into your email, we jumped from in excess of 3 months down to under a month. And across all categories, that's sustained now. FI requests, we were requesting information for every sort of application because we weren't consistent in the way that we would approach that. And in terms of convincing the powers that be, or those with the budget strings as to why you do it, consistently under budget, and for an investment which for us was quite big, and I said from the start this was an extreme example of going through this process. For a 700k investment, we've now sustained for 2 financial years a 600k recurrent saving. So this wasn't just for the fun of it, this was for our customers and for our ratepayers in terms of reducing the actual cost for the business. We also took the same approach, and cycling back to how Trapeze gets involved, of the electronic process into our compliance space. Same methodology, understand business requirements, understand the customers, employ the right bits of technology at the right time, and we saw our compliance issues drop from 3 months on average open time down to 3 days, just by using the right process, the right skills and the right technology. So in terms of some lessons learned, don't just take a crap process, digitise it, because you'll just make a crap process quick. you need to think about how does the customer experience it, what are your legislative outcomes, and then what do you need to deliver on. And that's not to say that all of this can be magically digitised. We're dealing with pieces of legislation, we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with built form outcomes. So we can't just automate the whole process. But by taking key decisions and putting the right tools to support them and thinking about how does a customer experience the process, you can certainly make some significant wins. For us, we tried to bootstrap, I guess, this approach initially. Forgot about the IT people and realised that we actually need them. We've got to be nice to our IT people. So we need to engage them early. They're not just the people who process the tickets, they're the ones who help keep the lights on. And as you shift from, I guess, a lot of councils where you're heavy on paper process and maybe 10% digitised like Playford was, to around 80% where we're headed, suddenly all that IT environment becomes part of your business continuity. You need the machines operating to do the work. So, I guess in summary, for us it was an experience around understanding how we could improve process, how we can use technology to support that, and making technology a key component of that journey, but not just designing it around the software. So we didn't get Trapeze out of the box and say, well, it does this and this. It does stamping, so we have to stamp everything, or it does shadowing tools, so we have to use that as part of our process. But we started with how does our customer want to experience this process, underneath what are any sort of legislative requirements, and then make sure that our process and system and the technology fit into that process. I said I'd keep it short. That's it. Thank you.